Hey guys, welcome back to the Gut Girls podcast. I'm so excited for this episode because we're having the cortisol conversation that nobody is having. And Diana and I chose to talk about this because it's in every consultation that we have. It's in every live group call that we have at the Gut Girls with our members. Cortisol shows up in some way, shape, or form. And I think what a lot of people ask us, whether they're looking at a GI map or not, so if they've done the test and we're having like a review of findings call with them, or they come to us without a test result, the biggest question is like, how did I get here? And so I think that's where the cortisol conversation comes in. So a lot of times it's like, hey, I'm exhausted, my immune system is, weak, or I'm getting sick all the time. I'm reacting to all the foods that I never reacted to. I'm waking up at 3 a.m., in the morning, can't fall back asleep. And they're wanting to know the answer to this. And the answer isn't usually one bad meal that they've, done. It's not a supplement that they are not taking. It's often what Diana and I would call years of survival. And that's what this episode is about. So it's not, even though I said it's the cortisol conversation that no one's having, it's not really just about cortisol from like a clinical standpoint. You guys are going to want to listen to this the whole way through, because we're going to bring it down into the terms of like, why is your cortisol dysregulated? So, people will say like, Dinah can chime in on this, but we hear things like, I haven't sat down all day long. I'm eating in my car. I'm trying to think of the women that have talked to us in our memberships. They'll say like, I haven't taken a deep breath in months, or better yet, we'll say, are y'all breathing? And they're like, gosh, no, I can feel it. It's like this tension in my chest. I haven't been able to actually take a deep breath in. They feel guilty when they're resting, right? They can't turn off their brain. They'll say, what's the phrase? I'm tired, but wired, sort of thing. And you guys can definitely relate to that comment. Or they'll say, I just don't know how much longer I can live like this. And so that's what they're saying to us. And that is cortisol, right? That's what cortisol is, but they don't know that. They're just describing to us the problem that they can't solve. And so what I want to talk about and what we're going to dive into is what survival mode actually looks like. And one of the biggest misconceptions is that stress has to feel dramatic. So when Diana and I ask, our clients, are you stressed out? Do you feel stressed? They're like, well, no, I've got the best life. Some of them that are retired, they're like, I'm retired. This is like the easiest season of my life. But guys, sometimes stress doesn't look dramatic at all. And that's what I think, even if you've gone to a doctor's office and they're like, it's stress, and you're like, but it can't be. I'm not living in this dramatic season of a loss, of some sort, or, chronic, fatigue or whatever it is. If you're like, but that's not me just yet. Let me say, sometimes stress looks different. So sometimes it's simply I can speak to this. It's getting the kids ready in the morning for school. You want to talk about a nervous system that's in fight or flight. You talk about the first minutes of the day getting a child ready for school, and then the evening getting a child bathed and their hair washed and PJs on and getting them to bed. That is what stress could be looking like for you. And it's over and over again every day. It could be a little bit more than that. It could be taking care of aging parents, right? That is stressful. There's a lot of responsibility on that. Running a business. We actually just talked about in the last 2 episodes. You will want to go back and listen to them, but Diana's business that she started and had to shut down after like 7 to 8 years. And we're going to talk about what that stress, like what did she do during that time? So you're going to have some tangible takeaways for this, but running a business is stressful. Financial pressures are stressful. Marriage is stressful. And even being the one that everyone depends on in your family could be stress. And so nothing may feel like it's necessarily falling apart when we talk about stress, but if you're carrying everything, it's heavy. And so that's the cortisol, not question, but conversation that we are going to have today.
Yeah, and we're going to use some personal examples, like for some from my story, and even honestly, right before we hit record on this podcast, Angela and I were talking about menopause and perimenopause and all the different things. And and our energy levels, and just kind of talking about how we feel and all those kind of things. And then all the things that she just mentioned, the busy mom, the business owner, the caregiver, somebody that's a perfectionist that has to have their schedule exactly the way. So, but we're going to talk a little bit about ourselves, like myself, and what I just went through, like Angela said. But I also, before I hit record, I told Angela, I was like, when she had her mom here in town, and her mom was like, gosh, you do a lot. And that's what I just reminded Angela. I'm like, you show up for your kids every morning. You make sure that they're well fed. You swing them on the swings when they need to be. You bathe them. You make sure that they're cared for. And like, so caring for two additional human beings, and yourself, and making sure that you show up in your marriage and you show up for God and go to church. And and not to mention, like, letting your kids be in extracurricular activities. I know you and I almost kind of are one extreme or the other, because your kids are a little bit younger, but then there's this whole big section of kids almost in between our kids where, they're 8 and 10 years old, and they're in 7,000 different activities, and you're going to soccer and gymnastics and taekwondo, and trying to schedule and organize all that, and when are we going to eat? Y'all, it is a lot. And so I remind Angela all the time, like, you are in the thick of it, girlfriend, with your kids where they are, because they still need you to put their shoes on for them, and to help them in all those different aspects. So I'm like, so we talked about the difference in like how I feel right now and how Angela feels. And guys, we're just in 2 different seasons of our lives. And so that's what this is about, is trying to help you guys recognize that. And I wanted to make sure that Angela recognizes how amazing she is, because she bakes bread. Y'all, I don't bake bread. I have more time than Angela does, and I don't bake bread. So there's just so many things that you show up for. So I want to applaud you. It is a stressful time, because not only do you show up for Gut Girls, but you also see patients as a chiropractor. You have your chiropractor license as well. You don't use that in our gut health coaching membership, but you do that as well a couple of days a week. And then again, showing up for your kids and just doing all the things that you have to do in this life. It's so busy. So I'm curious, like, how do you regulate your cortisol and your stress?
Yeah, well, thank you. It's a hot question to ask me, because there's moments where I'll realize I'm not handling it, when honestly, I will blow up on my kids, right? Like I'll blow up on my husband, I'll blow up on my kids, and I'll lay in bed at night and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is not me. Like, this is not how I want to show up in my life. And it makes me reflect back and honestly ask the harder question of like, what am I not doing for me in this season? Because that's typically when stress builds up, is you take care, like you said, of everyone else, and you forget like you're human and you have needs, and who's going to take care of me, right? And so that's my responsibility. And sometimes I do it after I realize I'm not doing it, let's be honest. But once I realized that, I was actually, like Dana said, we were talking before we hit record, and I said, I'm 40 years old. And so a lot of times when I go out with friends or talk to, family members or even my husband, and I'm like, I'm just off. Something's different. I can't put my finger on what's going on in my life, but I just feel like I'm spiraling. And usually the comment is, well, you're 40. You're probably, hormonal, like this is perimenopause. Have you considered getting labs ran? Well, let me tell you, I get labs ran probably more than anyone, because we have access to it through our lab shop. I'm constantly checking on my gut health, my labs. And honestly, it's not that. It's so funny. I actually went to my primary care. It was last year. And I was like, maybe I am missing something, and I want to get all the labs ran. Guys, everything came back normal. And every little thing, like this is the topic that everyone says, like, I went to the doctors and they're like, everything's normal. And I didn't fret, because actually it just reminded me of, I knew what I wasn't doing, and that was taking care of me. So in those moments, if I show up every morning, and I wake up and have protein. I'm talking like literally upon coming down the stairs. What I've gotten in the habit of doing, because it works for me, is I just literally mix up a protein shake. It's a protein powder with whether we use raw milk or water, whatever I have available. And it's not like a full shake, but it's like a half a shake. And I'm like, this is the first thing I'm putting in my mouth. And then I do typically like a cup of water after it. So I get some liquids in like right away, but it's protein. And that's because I'm a mom running on cortisol. And cortisol in the morning, if it is not like, if that pattern isn't stopped or supported, meaning like if I just woke up and had my coffee, I'm feeding in to the cortisol pattern. So I wake up, and honestly, it's before I have water. I just have that half a protein shake, and then I usually have some water. By that time, the girls literally follow me down the stairs. They're not that far behind me. And so then we start making breakfast, and then I'll have some caffeine if I want, and it's literally a cup of coffee. It's funny, when my mom was in town, she loves her second or third cup of coffee throughout the day. And we kind of laugh at each other, because she's like, don't tell me what your honest thoughts are about my caffeine intake, because she already knows. But she'd ask me repeatedly, and it's funny, she would say, gosh, Angela, like you said, you're so busy doing everything, you want to go get a coffee? It was almost like my reward, right? Like she was like, do you want to go get a reward with me? And I was like, Mom, if I have a cup of coffee, I'm actually going to put myself into a hole. Like, I'm trying to like coach her out of, don't we do that in society though? We're like, I work so hard, I deserve this. And I just know better. So I'd be like, let me go and take you if you want your coffee, no judgment, but I'm not going to do that, because I just know where it's going to get me later. So I make sure protein for me is probably the most essential thing that I do, Diana. And it's not just the morning that sets off the routine, like the rhythm, but it reminds me, if I start my day with protein, that like after a busy season of dropping the girls off or whatever, I come back and I'm like, okay, I probably need a little bit more protein. So then I have a little, you know what I mean? Like I'm always constantly having that protein check-in throughout the day. And then sunlight. My time with God is my long walks. You know that, because I'll call you and I'm like, I got to walk today. So it's taking my dog up the little, hill here on Pantops, and we walk, and we get to the very top where you can't even hear the cars below, and you just see the birds and the trees and the sunlight and the deers. And to me, that's like, I have to have that or I will go crazy. You know what I mean? So it's like, I know I need the sunlight. I know I need Jesus. I know I need my protein. And honestly, and the same thing, other than that, it's communication. I've learned over the years that when I'm in stressful states, I have to communicate that. Whether it's, Dana, I'll call you sometimes and I'm like, gosh, I'm just going through a hard time. Or I've learned how to speak about that to my husband. Like in marriage, it's hard to sometimes share what you're feeling. And so we've done, and he'll be honest and open to say, like, we've done marriage counseling to like, how do we share these hard times with each other and not take it personally, right? Like against each other. So it's like learning to communicate in those hard times and knowing the right people to communicate to. I'll wrap this up, but just say I have a dear, dear friend that I could call anytime and she will listen. But at the end of the conversation, she always turns it back to the Lord, honestly. And we end that conversation with like gratitude and what is he trying to teach you in this season? Like, I've never left a phone call with her spiraling in my own worries. Do you know what I mean? And so those are the things that if I'm doing those, and guys, they really don't cost me anything. A walk doesn't cost me anything. Protein, I mean, it's not costing you an arm and a leg, right? Just to get your protein in. Calling a trusted friend, gratitude, time with the Lord, it doesn't cost me really anything. And if I do that, I come back to myself and I feel amazing. And I'll end it to say where my friends typically would take me when I call them that don't really, I think, know me well, is they would say, do you think it's time for hormones? Like, do you think that, you just need to go on hormone replacement therapy? Because you probably feel so much more level. And Diana and I just talked about that. And it's like, my cycles are still regular. You know what I mean? Gosh, there's really no signs of that need right now. But oftentimes, Diana, women go there when they don't know the other things that can make them come back to life in stressful seasons. Would you agree?
Yeah, and I love everything that you just said, and I love that you kind of summarized it. So I do want to, for actionable steps for people, I do want to, and Angela mentioned those actionable steps, and but one of the things that she said but didn't actually summarize was that she recognizes that she can't run on that caffeine all the time. So just like she was saying, all the stuff she does do, she also doesn't do coffee and caffeine all the time. So I would say that's one of the things that like what it kind of is this light bulb moment with some of our clients and stuff when they are going through a GI map test and they're like, hey, I'm still hearing all this noise about cortisol and what does that look like? And I'm feeling it and, you know, whatever. And so we're recognizing that we have to do all of these things, but then maybe not do some things too. And one of those things is caffeine. So, and I will say too, I love that you talked about the things that you need and that it becomes routine for you so that you're doing the same things every single day. And that's one of the things that really helped me kind of in the most recent season of kind of my stressful season, like structure and routine was a big part of that. But before we get into that, one of the things that is really important for our listeners to recognize is that both of us are constantly doing the gut work. And so we're making sure that digestion is turned on so that our body can absorb these nutrients. We can eliminate the toxins the way that we're supposed to when we eliminate so we're constantly doing that piece of it too, to make sure that we're doing the nutrition and the gut work. So if you haven't ever done a GI map test to make sure that all of those things are turned on or maybe turned off, make sure your liver is detoxing the way that it should. You have enough commensal bacteria, you know, you're digesting your proteins and maybe your fats and carbohydrates well. And so all of that plays a part in the internal stressors that we're not going to spend a ton of time talking about on this episode, but that plays such a big part in it too, right, Angela?
Oh, 100%. And it's funny you say that because I actually just did a GI map on myself. I like to do them every year to check in because that's my accountability, guys. The GI map tells you a lot. And so I actually did one because I was feeling stressed. I was feeling just the heaviness of life is how I would describe it. And I did have H. pylori. It was just barely high, but it was there. And it was a reminder to me of like, okay, it wasn't this reminder of like, you got to start this huge protocol of supplements. It wasn't that. It was just this reminder of like, it is so important. Like if I don't look myself in the mirror right now and see all the things that I just let go, right? Like the self-care. And that's not like getting my nails done self-care. That's just like the self-care I just told you, the walking, the protein, the hydration, the talking to a friend. If I don't make that an appointment or a rhythm every single day of my life, that H. pylori was just a reminder to me of like two paths ahead of me, right? Like what are the two paths and which path do I want to choose? That's all it was. And so I got to walk away from that GI map with like, okay, I'm making a decision. And guys, I'm talking years into this, gut girls, like years I've been doing this and I still need that reminder, right? So like you never outgrow, I think, the benefits of a GI map because it just holds you accountable and it tells you like, okay, this is the truth. This is reality. And so Diana, let me go back though, because you had mentioned you did go through and you're kind of still going through it. It's a stressful season of transition for you. If you guys didn't listen, like she said, the last two episodes were about her storefront closing. Gosh, we cried together in that. I mean, it's a very heavy season, even though it's a beautiful season. And you mentioned there was a routine that you followed every day, just like kind of my routine. So I'm curious for them to hear two different kind of approaches to this. In the midst of all of that, what were the things that you knew you couldn't not do?
Yeah, one of the things that I knew that I needed to be successful to get through this very like emotional journey that I just went through. It was really abrupt. If you missed those 2 episodes, you can go back and listen to them to see that it happened over just a matter of weeks. And so when something like that happens to you, it would be the equivalent of somebody walking in to a job they've been at for 8 years and just like all of a sudden just them saying you're fired. You got to just figure it out. And so the things that I knew that I needed to do in that moment, not only for myself, but for my family, for my community, is I needed to make sure that I continued to show up for me, just like you talked about just a minute ago. So my thought behind the person that actually reached out and was like, hey, make sure I want y'all to talk about cortisol. What are the actionable steps? So those steps for me are 100%. I wake up at the same time within 15 to 20 minutes every day. So when I do a lot of times set an alarm in case I don't get up, but usually either I wake up or my dog wakes me up, one or the other. And so we're up within about a 15 to 20 minute window at the same time every day. And then the first thing that I do is I walk into the kitchen and I get myself just a little bit of electrolytes. I'm drinking about probably 4 to 5 ounces of water, something like that. And I put a little bit of minerals in there, a good quality electrolyte. Sip on that for a few minutes while I take my dog out and while I heat up my bone broth. I have been drinking Kettle and Fire bone broth for 8-9 years. Every single morning within the first probably 15 minutes or so that I wake up in the morning. There's so many things behind that. 1 is protein. 2 is the warmth that helps with motility. 3 is the collagen that helps support the gut lining. 4 is just the actual routine of drinking that in the morning. Reminder, that is not caffeine. That is not something that I drink first thing in the morning. So and then usually I take my bone broth and I head outside to meet my dog, and we usually water my flowers. So that's something that is really, really special and important to me. I love my flowers. And I go water my flowers, and it actually works out great from the time that we plant them, end of April, to the time that they usually die, sometime in October. The sunlight hits it first. It comes through the trees and hits my flowers first. So I literally pull the hose over, and I can see me like walking out of the shade, and into the sun that shines on my flowers. And so I just feel that morning warmth and water the flowers. So I'm like doing something super tangible, that like to watch it grow over the months. And that sounds so corny, and like old me would be like, that I would like be dying laughing at myself right now. Like, that is the corniest thing you've ever said, Diana, is like watering your flowers, but it fills me. So I look at life so different now than I did 10 years ago. I mean, it's just so different. I pay attention and I notice the growth of the flowers and the ones that are dead that need to be picked off. I mean, and you can use the analogy and the metaphor for so many things of that. Like, I want to go into this whole thing where I'm like, pulling the weeds is like, pulling out the bad, and just like all the things. But I'm trying to stick to the point that fills me so much in the morning. So that morning routine is something that almost never changes. And I feel like that shifts me out of that fight or flight, like right in the morning. It makes me feel safe. It makes me feel warm. And I start my day like that. I generally will start my day with a Bible verse, or sometimes I have time to like really get into the word or something like that. But as far as like true tangible things, that's what I do. And then I do want to jump to the end of my day, because in the middle is where there's a lot of things happening. Recording these podcasts, we jump on our live calls with our members, we're answering their questions, whatever the case may be that we're doing for that, or I'm running the girls to basketball or tennis or whatever. So the middle of the day is where The one thing that I try to do kind of in the middle of my day is to make sure that I get protein in again. So at some point I get protein in, and that's usually some sort of a leftover or something like that. So I make sure I prepare that ahead of time so that I have my leftover protein, and then I usually pair it with berries or a salad or something like that. And then kind of my other non-negotiable is to try to eat dinner around the same time every night, which that makes that a little bit challenging. And I would say 6 out of 7 nights during the week, that's family time that we're putting down our phone. We're talking about our days, our weeks, what we have ahead, what went well, what didn't go well. And then almost immediately after dinner, Todd and I have an appointment, I do that in air quotes, to go for our walk. It helps with my digestion, but more than that, even it's as far as like the stress relief, it's where he and I get to talk without the girls talking. And so that's our time that we get to share our days, how we're feeling, what we need to do, what our checklist is for tomorrow, whatever the case may be. Just like I get to hear about his day and kind of all of those things. And then at night, magnesium is something that I've recognized over the last probably 5-ish years. I've been taking magnesium glycinate at night. I take it about 2 hours before I go to bed, which is like kind of the perfect sweet spot. I usually take a little bit of CBD, which if you want to know more about that, listen to the last 2 podcasts. And then my bedtime is at 9:30, give or take 15 to 20 minutes. And so it's very, if you're hearing anything, hear this, it's very routine. And some people would call that boring. I call it safe. I call it contentment. I looked at Todd, and because I'm not so busy with the store like I have been, I'm able to really recognize like the flowers and just the beautiful things, kind of like you talked about earlier, where you go for your walks and look at nature and whatever. And so our body wants and craves that routine. So if you are hearing all this noise on Instagram and Facebook about cortisol and should you take peptides and do this and do that and whatever, some of the easiest and free, just like you said, it's so simple, is like, let your body have a routine, create the routine, make it structured, make it boring. And you'll think it's boring at first, but eventually it will become like a necessity for you. And that's like your non-negotiables. So that time in the morning for me is a non-negotiable. And then, my evening wind down time is a non-negotiable. So if you feel like you're constantly in that stress mode, it may be time for you to say no to something that's not important, something that maybe your kids are like dying to do, but that's not going to serve your family well. It's not going to serve you well because it's going to stress you out. It's going to stress all of you out. It may be the right time to say no. And it's hard to do that because I laughed at my kids the other day and I was like, I feel like lately I'm yes, mom. I'm saying yes to everything. And so, but I'm thankful because right now I feel like I do have that extra time to do that, to kind of say yes to more and go and do and whatever. But I want to tell you, if it's time for you to say no, if that's what you're feeling and you're in, like if your marriage is struggling or whatever, like go back to the basics of like what's important and what are your non-negotiables, what recognize what makes you feel best and make sure that that's your non-negotiable. And I know I've been talking for a long time and I'm going to turn it back over to you, Angela, too. But one of the things that we have a kind of a newer member that she's going through what we call our guided transformation. So she actually did do a GI map test and everything. And it was so interesting. We were on a live call with her and almost all of us were in tears listening to her story. Like we were listening to her heart, where she shared just for a couple of minutes about she lives in a busy city where she walks out her door and feels concrete, hears sirens, loud honking, constant. And she had gone home she's in the middle of doing her GI map test and kind of trying to like unwind her roadmap and like figure out how to begin her healing journey. And she had gone home for a week, and her family lives, I believe, on like 25 acres or something. I mean, man, what a dream, right? And so she said she had only been home for just a couple of days, and she could recognize the difference in the way her stress felt in that moment, in those few days, versus what she felt like when she's back, like living, in her city. And so her body is probably over that week made leaps and bounds in healing because she was able to recognize that she needed that stress relief. And so it was fun because actually on our live call, we had other people chime in and almost kind of help her through like, okay, so obviously, I gave up my career in the investment business and totally shifted careers. And we were like, we're not necessarily saying that, like, you don't have to do that, but how can you wake up and create your own routine and maybe bring yourself back into that feel of when you feel like you're at your 25 acres, like how can you feel that way to where you still have those same feelings and create that same routine for yourself? And so she was just so grateful to be able to recognize that, which is so amazing. And again, like old me is like, that's so corny, but new me is like, yes, what a win, is so amazing. So Angela, anything else you want to share about her?
Well, I think that just speaks to the deeper level, right? Like we started the podcast with saying what everyone says they like that, gosh, I never sit down, I can't take a breath, all this stuff. And they're like, how do I fix it? And then you talk about this client who's like, I just tapped into a deeper part of myself that recognizes this is non-negotiable for me to be healthy. And like, that's what we're talking about. You kind of said it as like saying no. We could talk about it as boundaries in relationships, but also boundaries in like the workplace. And, like what are the hard non-negotiables that you come to recognize, like, I can't actually live without this. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things that you can do when you are stuck in you could call it a cortisol, a high cortisol state. You could call it stress, if whatever you identify with. But when you're stuck in there, I would say it's probably because you've overridden a lot of the non-negotiables that your body needs, your nervous system needs, and so for this was again a client who reached out to us that said, please talk about this because I need the tangible takeaways. We've given them to you, but I'd also say for a lot of people, because we've had even the hardest clients who are so stuck in fight or flight. I mean, you could say this to them and they're still like, I don't know the first step to take. I'm in like freeze. We actually call it in the Gut Girls membership, as you're working through your GI map, we identify your nervous system with you. What phase are you stuck in? And one of them is, we call it a collapse phase. And that sounds scary if that's you, because you're like, I feel that. I don't even know that I have, I can identify where to take the first step, even hearing this stuff, right? Sometimes you are that collapsed. And this is what I think that the Gut Girls do so well. If that is you, that's where when you join us in the tier 2 membership, the first step is usually just showing up in the community. It is not doing anything else. Like, it's not taking a supplement. Sometimes you don't even have the energy to go out and take a walk. Like I said, I do, or, maybe you don't like bone broth and you're like, I can't start my day. Like maybe you're in that state where everything we just said, you're like, that seems too far-fetched for me. I would say sometimes it's just showing up and actually not taking a step. It's just showing up. We've had clients come on and not show their face and just their name is on there, or you could make up a name. I've told clients, come make up a name, Susie Q, and just, we don't know who you are. Like, they don't know who you are, and just show up and listen. Because sometimes the healing comes when you make an encounter with other people that literally see you, and they've actually never seen you, but they see, like, they can feel what you felt in your body. And sometimes it's just that moment where you're like, oh my gosh, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one. And then from there, you start taking the baby steps of what Diana and I just said. And so I think that's the beautiful part of the Gut Girls, Diana, is you can literally take any nervous system, bring it to what we've created in the Gut Girls and find a stepping stone. And it's just that you find that first stepping stone. And then from there, you make these, tangible action steps, like we said, more applicable. And then they become rhythmatic, like rhythmical in your life. And then they become the non-negotiables. And at the end of it, I'll kind of end it with this. I actually had the most beautiful follow-up consultation, if you want to call it, with a client of ours that had before and after GI map. And guys, this will blow your mind away. So, she is struggling with some of the things in her life that, come to find out, her mom also struggled with for years and is still struggling with. And as we went through her GI map, we got to uncover some of those non-negotiables. And if you're like, how did you uncover that? Let me just give you an example. She went from having elevated H. pylori, and in this time frame of her working with us, we got to retest H. pylori after we did a little bit of these non-negotiables, and we did some supplementation and dietary changes, but that H. pylori dropped way down to an ideal state. And then we did another GI map even later, and it went back up. And this is the beauty of doing multiple GI maps, being with the Gut Girls for years and being able to repeat your GI map, is we literally, in that conversation, I said to her, okay, what changed when in that season when we saw the H. pylori go down? What changed for you? And she actually said, in that season, I was doing more social stuff. It's not that she's a social butterfly per se, but she was making time to be with people in her life and to show up instead of just being in school and just being covered in work and studying and showing up for her field. And I was like, okay, that's the prescription I'm giving you as your coach. I'm not sending you home. I can't, obviously, because I'm not a doctor, I can't send you home with a prescription, but I'm prescribing more of that, more boundaries around that, because that was what made the shift. And it was, Diana, isn't that beautiful? Like, it's not costing them anything. It's just recognition of like, this is how I was created, and these are the non-negotiables that I need. And she was like, oh my gosh, this is so awesome, because my mom was never told this. Her mom's obviously much older. She's still struggling actually with H. pylori, and her mom's done all the antibiotics, all the Western medical stuff. And for her daughter to learn more about herself and be able to have a different future. I left that conversation almost like in tears of joy of like, this is transformational.
That's such a powerful story. I love that for her. And it's so nice that, think about how much you and I learn from our clients every day. We have these conversations, and you guys, we live a very busy life too. I know I kind of laugh at that right now because my life's a little bit different than it was, but for the last, we'll say 20 years of my, working, professional working life, I have been busy all the time. And it's constantly forced me to create that routine and create that time for me. So as we kind of are closing up here, I want to make sure that we do, I remind you of those actionable steps, which we've talked about. Create that safe space for yourself for the morning to get your routine started out right, for the evening to wind down and make sure you go to bed at a reasonable time, and then do the same thing. If you'll create that routine and that pattern, eating your protein within the first 30 minutes or so of waking or drinking it, getting your day started the same way and ending it the same way is so important. Trying to take little tiny movement snacks or whatever during the day, and what a movement snack is would be just like, okay, I've been sitting in front of this computer for 3 hours, working from home, or, maybe I'm in a factory or something like that, whatever your job may be. But you need to if you're in a factory, you need to take a time out and go outside, use that time that you have on your breaks to maybe take your shoes and socks off and just like literally sit there and just put your feet on the ground and eat your lunch, sitting at a park bench or something like that. So there's so many different things that you can do throughout the day. And I want to leave with one final thing. And again, it's kind of another corny thing that I would have told my old self that's the dumbest thing ever. But we all don't breathe correctly. A lot of times we're breathing from up here. If you're looking at me, I'm holding my chest instead of breathing more from the lower part, from the diaphragm. And so it's called, if you want to YouTube it, it's called diaphragmatic breathing. And what that does is it teaches you, it allows your body to kind of drive back into that rest and digest versus being in the fight or flight all the time. So if you are one of those people that you're like, I'm feeling very anxious, you feel very worked up, you start talking faster, your blood pressure rises, all of that stuff, that your body is shifting into that sympathetic state. To be able to drive it back, I would highly suggest that you go somewhere like find you could lay across your bed if you needed to. A lot of times I like to lay I lay in my closet. There's like carpet in my closet, so I'll lay in my closet. It's quiet back there. I'll lay in the floor, literally just like on my back on a soft floor, and do some breathing. I'll put my hands on my stomach and just make sure that I'm breathing and expanding that down there and not expanding up here. And you guys, there are people that I've worked with doing this over the last 5 or 7 years or whatever. And they're like, the breathing really helps. So we suggest you do that even before you eat to help with your digestion. But so if you're feeling that you're in that fight or flight, I would say do your breathing. And then I would say keep that safe space of your routine. And if you feel like you're doing all those things well, but you've never actually done a GI map test, then that could be sort of the missing internal stressor that you're looking for. So if that's the case, we'd love for you to join us. Whether you're just getting started, we have a what's called the self-starter membership for you. It's $15 a month. We have resources. We have a way for you to really just kind of get started, do some of these simple, quick relief type things. And then if you're ready for a GI map test and you're thinking like, hey, I'm kind of doing all those things. I've got my routine down. I'm doing my breathing, but maybe it's time for me to do the GI map test and really see, am I digesting my food? Do I have enough commensal bacteria? Is my H. pylori elevated? Because we do often see that with higher stress. And so if you want to get to the root of that, then you can join us for that too. So you can do a free 15 consultation with us. We're happy to kind of put you where you need to go and whichever road that you need to head down. And so you do that by going to our website, gutgirls.health. Again, that's gutgirls.health, not .com. And so head there, do a free 15 with us. And we hope that this has been helpful for those of you that feel like you're constantly in fight or flight, to give you some actionable things to do moving forward. So we hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Gut Girls podcast, and we'll see you on the next one.
The Gut Girls podcast is for educational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. We are not acting as licensed medical professionals. Always consult your doctor before making any changes to your health routine.